James sat alone in his dimly lit apartment, counting the last few dollars in his hand. Then a knock, soft, hesitant. Outside, a homeless man shivered in the cold. James didn't think twice before letting him in, but when morning came, his world changed. The army had come looking for him. "Welcome to Untold Narratives. Let's get started." James Carter sat in his dimly lit apartment, staring at the peeling paint on the walls. The once proud Army veteran now lived in a rundown complex on the outskirts of town, surviving on a modest pension that barely covered rent and food. The discipline and structure of military life had given him purpose, but since leaving the service, he felt lost, adrift in a world that no longer seemed to need him. Once, James had led teams through dangerous missions, standing shoulder to shoulder with men who would risk their lives for him. Now, the only voices he heard were those on his old radio, filling the silence of his lonely evenings. Civilians walked past him as if he were invisible. Employers dismissed him for being overqualified. The transition from a decorated soldier to a struggling veteran had been brutal. That night, as James sipped his last cup of coffee, he noticed movement outside his window. A man sat slumped on a bench, shivering violently in the biting cold. His tattered coat barely covered his frail frame, and his breath came in short, ragged bursts. James hesitated for only a moment. With a deep sigh, he grabbed his old army jacket and stepped outside. "Hey, buddy," he called out. The man flinched, looking up with wary eyes. "Come inside. It's too damn cold out here." The man hesitated before nodding, his gratitude unspoken but evident. James led him inside, setting a plate of leftover stew in front of him. "Eat," he said simply. As the man devoured the meal, James handed him a warm blanket. Watching him, James felt something he hadn't in a long time, a sense of purpose. Tom's hesitation was palpable as James set the steaming bowl of stew in front of him. The man eyed it warily, clearly unsure of what to make of the gesture. He wasn't used to kindness, certainly not from someone who didn't owe him anything. His eyes were sunken, his beard thick and unkempt. He hadn't spoken a word since James invited him in, but the rawness in his face told a story of his own struggles. After a long moment, Tom picked up the spoon, his hands trembling as he brought it to his lips. "Thank you," he muttered, barely audible. James sat across from him, quietly watching. The awkward silence stretched until Tom finally looked up, as if something inside him was battling to be heard. He wiped his mouth and met James's gaze. "I never thought I'd end up like this," Tom said, voice thick with emotion. James leaned forward slightly, his curiosity piqued. "How'd you get here?" he asked gently. Tom's eyes flickered with a memory, a far-off look in them. "I was a soldier once," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "A good one, honorable, but I got hurt, the kind of injury that never healed right. They sent me home, but it wasn't the same. They dishonorably discharged me. I had nowhere to go." James felt a pang in his chest as Tom's words hit home. He too had served in the military, and though his own discharge was under different circumstances, he could understand the abandonment Tom felt, the sense of being thrown away after giving so much. James didn't offer pity. Instead, he gave a simple nod, letting Tom speak without judgment. "I tried, you know," Tom continued, his voice breaking now. "But the system doesn't care about people like me. They don't care about anyone who isn't useful anymore." James's heart ached. He had no answers to offer, but he understood. The brotherhood he'd once been a part of felt like a distant memory now, and Tom was another casualty of the same system that had left him behind. Later that night, as the sound of the city outside faded into silence, James lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The faint sound of Tom's soft breathing from the living room kept him awake, and his mind wandered to the past. He thought about his own transition from soldier to civilian, how abrupt it had been. One moment he was part of something bigger than himself, and the next, he was just another man with no clear direction. The loneliness crept in, a constant companion that refused to leave him. James had no family, no close friends, and though he had once been surrounded by comrades in arms, now it felt as if those bonds had dissolved the moment he left the army. He had felt the sting of being discarded, just like Tom. The thought gnawed at him. How easily could he have ended up like Tom, alone, forgotten, left to wander the streets, relying on the mercy of strangers? It was a cruel thought, but one that was all too real. What if one bad break had led him here into the same cold, dark abyss? James closed his eyes, trying to push the thought away, but he couldn't ignore the deeper question that lingered. Was that why he helped Tom? Was it out of guilt for his own fortune, or because he truly saw the man as a brother in arms? As he drifted off to sleep, the sense of connection with Tom lingered. The next morning, James woke up to the soft rays of sunlight filtering through the window. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment, he forgot where he was. Then he remembered. Tom was here. James stretched, groaning as his stiff muscles protested. He could already hear the soft sounds of movement in the other room, but as he got out of bed and walked into the living room, he was struck by a sudden sense of emptiness. Tom was gone. At first, James thought he might have just woken up before him, but the apartment was eerily quiet, and there was no sign of Tom, no blanket on the couch, no half-eaten food. It was as if the man had vanished into thin air. James stood there confused. Had Tom left in the night? Was it some instinct, some deep-rooted need for self-preservation that drove him to disappear? Or had something else happened? A surge of disappointment hit James, a sense of loss that caught him off guard. But before he could dwell on it, a sudden knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Startled, James moved toward the door. He wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, he hesitated. Who would be knocking at this hour? He peered through the peephole and froze. Standing in the hallway were 3 men. 2 uniformed officers and a tall, imposing figure in a sharp military uniform. James opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice wary. The officer in the middle stepped forward. "We're looking for a man, Tom Mitchell. Do you know him?" James's heart skipped a beat. He opened his mouth, unsure of what to say. Tom had never mentioned his last name, and now this. He suddenly felt very small in the presence of these men. I don't know where he went," James said slowly. "He stayed with me last night, but he left early this morning." The man in uniform studied James for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You let him stay here?" James nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, he needed help. I just gave him some food and let him sleep for a bit. I didn't think it would cause any problems." The officer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked to the man beside him, the tall general who had yet to speak. The general stepped forward, his sharp gaze locking with James's. "You just saved a hero's life," he said, his voice deep and steady. James blinked, taken aback. "What?" he asked, his confusion only growing. The general's gaze softened, and for the first time James noticed the kindness in his eyes. That man, Tom Mitchell, he's a hero, a decorated soldier, dishonorably discharged after an injury. He was abandoned by the system, but he's still a hero. We've been searching for him for years. James felt his chest tighten. He had no idea who Tom really was, what he had gone through. The general continued. His discharge was a mistake, a decision based on misinformation. Tom was wronged, and we've been trying to bring him back ever since. As the general spoke, James's mind raced. He thought back to the night before, to Tom's raw honesty about his past. He had only ever shared the pain of his betrayal and his struggle to survive. But there was so much more, so much that James had yet to understand. Now standing in front of him, the truth was slowly unraveling. Tom wasn't just some homeless man. He was a soldier, one who had been discarded by the very system that had once honored him. But Tom was gone now, and the question was, what would James do? Would he help these men find Tom, or would he let him fade into the shadows once more? James stood at the threshold of his apartment, staring out into the cold city streets, his mind heavy with the decision he had just made. He could have walked away. He could have let it go and gone back to his quiet, solitary life. But something inside him, something that had always been there during his years in the military, drove him to act. It was a sense of duty, of responsibility to those who had served and sacrificed alongside him. It didn't matter that Tom was no longer a part of the army. The bond they shared as soldiers transcended the uniform. James couldn't let Tom be forgotten. He couldn't allow the system that had cast him aside to win. He had to find him. With a deep breath, James grabbed his jacket and headed out the door. The morning was cold, the sun still low in the sky, casting long shadows across the city. He didn't know where to start, but he knew he had to try. He went first to the shelters. He spoke to the workers there, showing them Tom's picture, describing the man as best as he could. The workers, accustomed to the constant flow of people, were hesitant to give any concrete information, but James pressed on, his determination unwavering. As he wandered through the streets, each corner and alleyway brought him closer to the man who had once been a brother in arms. The more James thought about it, the more he realized how easily it could have been him lying in the cold, discarded by society, with no one to turn to. The thought gnawed at him as he passed through the rundown neighborhoods, but he refused to let the bitterness take hold. Hours passed, and James found himself further from the apartment than he had expected. His legs ached from the constant walking, and his mind raced with doubts. What if Tom was already long gone, lost to the streets for good? What if he didn't want to be found? But just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, a sense of recognition tugged at his chest. He turned down a narrow alleyway, hidden from the main streets, and there, curled up against the cold brick of a building, he saw him. Tom. The homeless man was hunched over, his body wrapped in rags that barely shielded him from the wind. His face was gaunt, eyes closed, and his breathing shallow. For a moment James hesitated, unsure of how to approach. But the thought of walking away, of leaving Tom to slip further into despair, was unbearable. "Tom," James called softly, his voice breaking through the quiet of the alley. Tom's eyes shot open, wide with panic. He quickly pushed himself up, as if he had been caught in some terrible act, though there was nothing to hide here in the alley. His hands trembled as he looked at James, disbelief written all over his face. "What are you doing here?" Tom's voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "You should go. It's better this way. You don't owe me anything." James crouched down to Tom's level, his face serious yet full of compassion. "I owe you nothing," he said, "but I'm not leaving you here. You don't have to do this alone." Tom's eyes flickered with a mix of anger and sadness. "It's too late for me. You don't understand. I'm not worth saving." His voice cracked with the weight of his words, his body shaking as he pulled his knees to his chest. "I'm broken, James. I've been cast aside by everyone. I don't even know who I am anymore." James sat down beside him, his own exhaustion forgotten. He didn't try to fix things. He didn't offer empty words of reassurance. Instead, he simply sat there with Tom, his presence enough to show that he wasn't giving up. "You think I don't understand?" James said softly. "I've been there. I've felt like I was nothing. I've felt invisible. He looked down at his hands, fingers stiff from the cold. But it's never too late. It's not about what you've done or where you've been. It's about what you choose to do next. And right now, I'm telling you, you don't have to face this alone. Tom's tear-filled eyes searched James's face, his hardened exterior cracking just enough to let the pain slip through. I can't go back. I can't face them. They'll never forgive me. James shook his head. It's not about forgiveness. It's about honor. It's about doing what's right, even when it's hard. He placed a hand on Tom's shoulder, steady and firm. We're going back, Tom. Together. We'll face the truth no matter how difficult. For a long moment, Tom didn't speak. His body trembled with the weight of his own shame. His hands clenched tightly as if holding onto the last shred of his dignity. But slowly, the tension seemed to drain from his body. Finally, he nodded. I'll go back, he whispered, but only because you're here. James helped him to his feet, steadying him as they walked out of the alleyway and back toward the army base. The journey wasn't easy. Every step seemed to carry the weight of Tom's past with it. But with James beside him, Tom found the strength to keep moving forward. When they arrived at the army base, General Matthews was waiting for them. The sight of Tom standing before him was a bittersweet moment for both men. There was no anger in the general's eyes, only a quiet resolve. Welcome home, Tom, General Matthews said, his voice thick with emotion. You've been through hell, but we're here now. You're not alone anymore. The general's words brought a sense of closure, but also a spark of hope that had been extinguished for so long in Tom's heart. He stood tall, though still fragile, as Matthews spoke to him about restoring his honor. Tom would undergo medical treatment, both physical and emotional, and the army would help him get back on his feet. James watched from the sidelines, his chest swelling with pride. He had no idea what the future held for Tom, but in that moment he knew he had done the right thing. Before James could turn to leave, General Matthews called him over. James, I'm not sure how to thank you for what you've done, the general said, extending his hand. You've given Tom a chance at redemption. For that, I'm offering you something as well. James raised an eyebrow, surprised. What do you mean? Matthews's expression softened. I've been thinking. You've got the heart of a soldier. You understand what it's like to lose your way. There are other veterans out there who need help, people who've been abandoned just like Tom. I'm offering you a role, one that would allow you to help them, mentor them, help them find their way back, just like you did for Tom. James's heart skipped a beat. It was more than he could have ever imagined. An opportunity to give back, to help others who had been forgotten. It felt like a new beginning, one he never thought was possible. I don't know what to say, James murmured, his eyes brimming with emotion. Thank you. The general smiled. It's the least I can do. You've earned it. And so James Carter, the once lonely and forgotten veteran, found his purpose again, not just in serving his country, but in helping others who had been cast aside by it. The journey was far from over, but James knew that the road ahead was one he could walk with pride. The story of James and Tom carries a profound message. No one is truly lost if someone still believes in them. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the belief of one person can bring light to another's life. James, though struggling with his own demons, saw Tom not as a hopeless case, but as a man worth saving. His kindness wasn't just a gesture, it was a lifeline that pulled Tom from the edge of despair. Through his actions, James learned a powerful truth. Kindness doesn't only change the person who receives it, it transforms the giver as well. In reaching out to help Tom, James discovered a deeper sense of purpose, one that had been buried beneath the weight of his own loneliness and pain. By saving Tom, he was, in turn, saving himself. The emotional wounds from his years of service and subsequent isolation began to heal, and the heavy burden of being forgotten was lifted, if only for a moment. Helping another soldier gave James the chance to rebuild his own sense of worth and belonging. Tom's second chance at life was just the beginning, but so was James's. The story ends with him walking into his new role, not as a forgotten man, but as someone who had rediscovered his duty to serve. It wasn't just about his service in the military, it was about his service to humanity, to fellow soldiers, and to the brotherhood that transcends uniforms and ranks. In the end, James found peace not by retreating from the world, but by re-engaging with it. And in helping others find their way, he found his own. The duty to serve never truly ends.